On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 63, created on December 6th, 2023. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, I am drinking Pariah Brewing All the Bootleg Snacks, which seems like an appropriate drink for how the Packers played. And I want to read the description. What you're holding is liquid absurdity. This imperial milk stout is loaded with cinnamon, chocolate, coconut, condensed milk, and vanilla over an extremely decadent beer.
Neil, I salute you. That's awesome.
Holy shit, is it decadent, by the way. This is delicious.
I'm going with the Cranfather by Founders Brewing. It's a special holiday beer, and yes, it's very cranberry.
We seem to have a cranberry theme, Jeff, but because we are going to New York City this week, I've got a Cosmopolitan. All right, you can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. What are we going to be talking about this week? Well, it was a great weekend in Green Bay with tailgating and a Week 13 victory of the Packers over Chiefs on Sunday night. Hey, and even in the last 5 games, it's been a whole lot of Jordan Love, and we're going to talk about the success of the last 5 weeks and look ahead, as I mentioned, to that trip to New York City and Monday Night Football with a little bit of history to tie in with that. So let's start from the beginning, Neil. You came into town. Well, first you came into Milwaukee. You had a good start with a nice soccer match.
I did. Arsenal played on Saturday. I flew into Chicago, drove up to Milwaukee, watched a match with Brew City Gooners as an appetizer for the entire weekend. And the weekend overall was a beautiful weekend that I spent talking with a lot of people, a lot of Packers podcasters, a lot of Packers writers, and then going on to hang out with a lot of Packers tailgaters and even hanging out with a lot of the Kansas City fans that were in town for the weekend. Overall, a beautiful weekend, even before we got to the game.
Neil, you must have done a lot of talking and a lot of yelling because you sound a little hoarse.
It is 3 days after the Packers-Chiefs game. I was hoarse by the middle of the second quarter of that game. I was yelling so hard. The fan experience at that game was one of my favorite regular season games ever. And yes, I am still recovering, and I am hoping that it takes another couple days because this memory is certainly burned in from a beautiful Packers-Chiefs game.
And did you move those chains? That's the important question.
I was leading the move those chains, and sections 103 and 105 were certainly going along with me, and that was a lot of fun.
You are in certain circles out there known as the move those chains guy. That's all they talk about. You know, there's a move those chains guy in the north end zone. Yes, Neil, that is you. Before we talk about the game and moving the chains, though, as you said, hey, we had a great weekend in Green Bay, but things started out really fun on Saturday night. We had a really good weekend social media wise as well, but you said you met some other podcasters and writers. Tell us about the Saturday night experience, Neil. Where were you?
Andy Herman had put on Twitter that he was going to be hosting an event on Saturday night at Badger State Brewing. And he said, it's just going to be a Q&A. We're going to have a bunch of people there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And so I showed up at Badger State at 7 after going to Cranky Pat's Pizza. Of course, I had to get all of my Green Bay experiences in. Nice. Show up there, and you can see the photo if you're on YouTube. Back by the brewing tanks, there was a whole bunch of different Packers people. Andy Herman was holding court. Andy Herman is one of my absolute favorite Packers writers. And what I learned in person, he's just an incredibly smart person who has a lot of really great thoughts on the Packers, on football. There were a lot of other people who were associated both on Twitter and also through the Pack-A-Day podcast and through Cheesehead TV, who were all there. And I would say it's kind of shocking that there were probably more writers and podcasters there than there were non-writers and podcasters who were at that event. I had a really beautiful time talking to various people with experience with the Green Bay Packers, including people like Matt Freilich. Aaron Nagler was also there. There were a number of people associated with Cheesehead TV. All of them were really friendly, really enjoyable to talk to. There was the Carry the G beer that was widely flowing, along with all of the other beers that were available at Badger State Brewery. it was just a really fun time talking with a lot of really smart people who really enjoyed talking Packers. And there were some really fun stories. I may get to some of those stories later, but overall, it was just bringing together a group of people that love talking publicly about the Green Bay Packers. And certainly they love talking in this environment as well.
So you found your people, Neil.
I found people that would have been all of our people. I really wish John and Jeff had been able to join me there.
You must have made a really good impression, at least on Andy Herman, because he is now a follower of the GBC podcast on Twitter. So Andy, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining us. But that's what it's all about, Neil. It's networking. It's making those connections and getting more people in tune to what it is that we're trying to do. And yeah, there's a lot of Packer podcasts out there. We have fun with ours. And we did meet a lot of people who did add us on Twitter this weekend. And again, thank you for joining us.
But more importantly, it was just a matter of having fun talking about the Green Bay Packers. It was about excitement about where this team is going, about how they have advanced from the earlier stages of this year, including some very dark periods in this season, to where they are now, where Packers fans are really excited about this team. And more than anything, that's what it was. It was just about talking with people that were passionate about the Packers. I absolutely loved it.
The fan base certainly is a lot more optimistic. We had a rough stretch in October, but November has been really good to us. November and December now really good. And it's something we talked about last week. Peaking later in the season or peaking at the right time is more important. You don't want to peak in week 2 and then have the rest of the season go to shit. And Green Bay, I think, is really peaking. We've got a nice 5-game stretch coming up here that we're going to talk about. But at this point of the season, being 6-6, I think we were hoping they would be 6-6. It's just the way they got there is a little bit different than what we expected.
Well, let's just go to the simple numerics. None of us predicted the Packers were going to beat Kansas City in this game that we just played. And even within our broader group of people that are in our Packers conference pool, nobody picked the Packers to beat Kansas City. And yet going to this game, we all thought there was a chance we were going to beat Kansas City. And that is the improvement that we've seen with this team.
With that, you interacted with quite a few Kansas City fans, both Saturday night and on Sunday. What was their feeling? What kind of feeling did you get from them coming into this game?
One of my favorite things about coming back to Green Bay, going to Lambeau for games, is meeting with the visiting fans. And we had anticipated the excitement of the Kansas City Chief fans, right? There is certainly a very passionate fan base. We know that they know how to party. We know that they strongly support their team. And out on Saturday night, I met a few Kansas City fans. I saw a somewhat larger number at Stadium View on Saturday night, but on Saturday night, I wasn't really impressed by the total numbers of overall fans. But I showed up at Stadium View on Sunday at 1 p.m., so 6 hours before kickoff, in the time frame of when we showed up for Buffalo last year. Now, Green Bay 6 hours before kickoff is not Buffalo 6 hours before kickoff, to be fair, but the Stadium View was doing really well. And I was certainly impressed by the number of Kansas City fans that were there. It was something in the range of 40% of Stadium View was Kansas City fans. But the Kansas City fans were just universally really fun to talk to, really great. I just sort of was randomly going around talking to whoever wanted to chat. There were a lot of people wearing Taylor Swift oriented shirts in various guises. And that was a lot of fun. They certainly recognize the Swiftie nature of their team in the year of our Lord 2023. But as much as anything, there are a lot of fans from Kansas City who just wanted to talk about the experience of playing a game at Lambeau Field, right? This is a bucket list stadium for a lot of fans. You take a passionate fan base like Kansas City, and a lot of them really wanted to go to Green Bay independent of the team that they were playing, just because of the opportunity to experience Lambeau Field. And that was one of the things I really enjoyed. If you're on YouTube, you've got this group that I talked to for about 20 minutes at the Stadium View overlooking Lambeau Field. And one of the things that they specifically noted about Lambeau Field is it's very different than the experience at Arrowhead Stadium. And the Arrowhead Stadium is a lot like Highmark Stadium in Buffalo, in that the stadium has basically got a parking lot around it and then suburbia around it. There's no whole series of bars and different urban type things. And I put that in quotes, but nonetheless, that is really what Green Bay Stadium is more like. It's more like an urban stadium in that it's in the middle of the city with a lot of different businesses that are all around it. And they really enjoyed the experience at Stadium View, that they were able to just go and interact with random people, not just their group of tailgaters, but they could go to different bars, go to different restaurants, all within walking distance of Lambeau Field. And I think that's one thing that I had not previously so much appreciated about Lambeau is the fact that we really do, with the stadium district, have a gathering point that is not just things that are controlled by the team, but it's a gathering point for a lot of businesses, for people to show up and interact with other fans. And those interactions with other Chiefs fans were like many experiences I've had over the years with other fans at Stadium View and elsewhere around the stadium. It was a lot of fun.
Neil, did you find that most of the Kansas City fans that were there for the first time?
Almost everyone. I don't know that I actually met anyone who said that they'd been to Lambeau previously. So it was a lot of Lambeau virgins who were there, and they were just sort of in awe of this entire setting, this entire atmosphere that is around Lambeau Field and all of those fans. And they certainly appreciated what Packers fans give to the game. They appreciate the passion of Packers fans. They certainly expressed their passion for their Kansas City Chiefs. I heard a couple of tomahawk chops, a couple of Chiefs and things like that, but that was all in good fun. It's really an enjoyable experience.
And the correct response to that, Neil, is cheese.
That is correct. Let's overwhelm their Chiefs with cheese.
And you remember our friend Charles from Kansas City, who we talked to last year, just before the Super Bowl. And I connected with him. We had traded numbers, so I connected with him to see who was coming. He and his wife did not make it to Green Bay. They just had a little baby girl, so they stayed home. But he knew some people who were coming to Green Bay. He gave them my number. They connected with me. I got him to the Lot 1 tailgate party. Of the group of 4, one of them had been to Lambeau Field before everybody else, first time. And man, did they have a great time. They came into Lot 1. They realized that they were welcome. They weren't treated like pariahs. They weren't looked down upon for wearing red or anything along those lines. And that is, I say this over and over again, but it is true. That is what we want. We want people to come to Green Bay to experience football in Green Bay, the Lambeau experience. And Neil, when you talk about visiting fans, it's a bucket list item. And yeah, okay, so there was a lot of red in the stadium. We're not going to try to control who fans sell their tickets to because of that concept. We want other fans to be able to come in, just like we enjoyed going to Buffalo. We enjoyed going to Cincinnati. We wanted to be able to have that opportunity to go on the road as well. So bringing them in, I can tell you from my perspective, they really appreciated being there.
Yeah, and the guys that are in the photo, they all did a shot ski in Lot 1.
Yes.
But more globally, the Packers fans are known for traveling well. That means we go to games and we make our presence known at games. Well, guess what? If you're going to be known at games, the approach to ticketing that allows Packers fans to be known at games is something that is inherently going to allow other fan bases who are passionate to also be known at their games. And the Kansas City fans, they were significant. On the Chiefs side, it was maybe 15% of fans were Chief fans. The rest of the stadium was maybe 5%. But the difference between what happened with the Detroit game and Kansas City is that in either case, it was fine that all those other fans were there. The difference is the Packers were dominant. They won beginning to end in that game. There was never a point during that Packers-Chiefs game in which the Chiefs fans really made a lot of noise. In fact, the only time that I really heard Chiefs fans during the game was when the stadium announcer would say, when the Packers were on offense, "Quiet, please, offense at work." And that, of course, completely riled up all of the Chiefs fans. Basically, if the stadium announcer had just shut up whenever the Packers were on offense, we would have heard almost nothing of Chiefs fans in the game because we were the better team. And that's the thing, right? If your team is going to be the better team, you're going to be dominant over the other fans in noise, no matter how many other fans are present there. But I love visiting fans. It is one of my favorite parts of going to Lambeau. It's one of my favorite parts of going to every other game that I go to. I love interactions with visiting fans. That makes the game better. It was a perfect weekend in Lambeau.
Neil, we need to start a grassroots movement to get me to take over that seat from Bill Jartz when he's ready to retire.
Absolutely, John.
Just a quick editorial note for those listening. The picture that Neil had displayed with the Kansas City fans, they were bundled up. They had hats, they had winter coats, they had their red, but they were all bundled up. Neil, it looked like, it was like summer almost. Neil had, what you could see for Neil, no hat. He had his jersey on. He had a long sleeve t-shirt underneath that. He looked comfortable and ready to go for December game at Lambeau Field.
I did have my layers on, to be fair. I'm a veteran of Packers games in December.
Now, Neil, you mentioned that Packers fans travel well, and it's not just Packers fans traveling well to road games. Packers fans travel well to home games. Now, here's another group that we met up with, our friend Kate, who we talked to earlier this year, the Colorado girl now living in Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin on the border. She has her tailgating podcast, her tailgating crew, and these people came from lots of parts of southern Wisconsin. There was a Missouri guy, a Colorado guy, and so on. And these are fans that travel to come to games. Two of her friends that she does her podcast with, Jan and Danny, they're coming to the Buccaneers game, one from Texas, one from California. So Packers fans travel well, and we were able to join Kate and her group as they got things started off. They were, as you see, the big letter G next to the Nitschke Field, and we had a little pizza and some beverages and chatted with everybody who came in that day.
It's always great to hang out with. I actually met up with her after the game too, as we're all waiting for traffic to disperse after the game. And we're just sort of celebrating the happiness of the victory. That's the thing. There's the tailgating. There's the partying atmosphere associated with tailgating, but then there's just sort of talking with people and chatting and bullshitting. And the bullshitting before is not just before the game, it's also after the game. And just sort of that afterglow element after a Packers victory is certainly one of the great elements of going to the game, something you don't get when you just watch it on TV.
So in this group, were there a number of virgins here, or were these pretty all experienced Lambeau Field goers?
I believe they all had been here at least one other time.
Okay.
But I could be corrected on that. When Kate watches the show here, she'll fix us up on that. But I'm pretty sure they all had been around, and like I said, they were all ready to go, and they were dressed for the weather as well. You can see that they weren't as underdressed as Neil or I were, because I don't have my hat on there. Neil, I don't think he had his hat on there.
I did actually have I did have a hat. I didn't
want to mess up my hair just yet. I had to wait a little bit. Plus, my friend Dave was with us over by Kate's group, and then you, Dave, and I walked back to Lot 1, where the action happens. And Lot 1 was ready to go with the shot skis and the Grandma Lambeau's apple pie. And like I said, Charles' friends from Kansas City came by. There were quite a few Kansas City people that came through, and the guys that you knew, and they just kept coming through. And like I said, they were there for the Lambeau experience. We gave it to them, weather and everything. It was a nice, brisk northerly breeze.
There was snow. We had snow for basically until like half an hour before the game started. We had snow. It was gorgeous. It was absolutely a beautiful day. Now that snow meant we all got wet. We were afraid of getting cold in the game, but it was gorgeous.
It was exhausting. Something about the weather that day, Neil, just made it exhausting. At the end of the tailgate party, we were cleaning up at kickoff and listening to the game in the parking lot. I was like, man, I can't wait to get it.
Well, having not made the trip, unfortunately, to Lambeau, I was enjoying our fresh cut Christmas tree in the warmth of my own house. So I experienced something a little different than you did, a little quieter, and certainly would have loved to have joined you. And Neil's, your reactions this game, you were, the social media posts and things like that. I mean, you really, really reveled in this one. I could tell you were having a great time. And I was actually getting a little worried after the game, because normally you post some things and like you sort of went quiet. And I'm like, should we do a wellness check on Neil, or is he gonna...
I am happy to say that I only did one shot ski as opposed to the last game where I think I did about 5 or 6 of them. So I managed to sort of keep myself paced as far as the pre-gaming was concerned. And that allowed me to stay up until whatever 1:30, 2 o'clock after the game was done.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint, is what you're saying.
And I've done 9 marathons, and I know what marathons are. I'm an experienced drinker.
Fabulous.
Jeff, talking about the coziness of your own home, I want to throw this out there. Neil, you had made a reasonable offer with your tickets, and I had told my brother, hey, we can get 2 tickets and go into the game. And I really tried to get him to go, but I know darn well he was sitting in his nice warm living room with the fire on and his fuzzy socks and his hot chocolate, and that's all he was thinking about for Sunday night. And he wanted nothing to do with 32 degrees and a 10-mile-an-hour northerly wind with snow.
Yeah, both of you missed out, because that was one of my favorite regular season games ever. This ranks up with the 48-47 Monday Night Football game back in '83.
Wow.
It definitely would have been a great game to be inside. I chose not to go. We cleaned up the tailgate. I actually did make it home by halftime. I was listening to the last play of the half in my driveway before I went inside, and watched the second half on TV. But let's talk about the game that did happen.
So my seats are in the north end zone. I had a good group of cousins who were there with me. And the atmosphere was one where Packers fans knew that something special could potentially happen. And the Packers right away on their first drive went ahead and did something special. So Kansas City won the kickoff. They deferred. So we're going to get the ball first. And so we're in a situation kind of like what we had in Detroit. And it was amazing. We moved the ball right down the field that entire first drive. We did it by passing, starting with the pass to Reed. Dylan had a bunch of runs, third down conversions, pass to Kraft, passes to Reed, passes to Wicks. We just kept moving the ball. It was like we had an offense that was back at peak Aaron Rodgers era where we were not going to be stopped. We eventually get down close to the end zone. We get to the 1 yard line after a 6-yard Dylan run and a touchdown pass to Ben Sims. And the photo on here is my view of that touchdown to Sims. Obviously a great route, but also just a well-designed play. Nobody's stopping Ben Sims on the touchdown there. You have the roll up from Love, Sims touchdown. Perfect start for that game. 13 plays, 75 yards, 7 minutes and 40 seconds of game time in order to give ourselves a 7-0 lead against the defending Super Bowl champions.
And Ben Sims, an undrafted free agent who spent his training camp, Jeff, in Minnesota. So how fun is that to have this kid on the team? And he got his first career NFL touchdown on that play.
And Lambeau Leap as well. That was fantastic to see. But for me, it was the almost 8-minute opening drive. This was not a thing. This was unheard of 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. This was just would have been a showstopper. Now it's kind of getting to that, okay, they just controlled, and like Neil said, the running, the passing, the 19-yard pass to Watson was sort of a nice highlight as well. Getting him involved. Half the quarter was just the first drive, and again, ending in a touchdown.
A nice sustained drive, ball control, and getting the points is the key to winning a game. There were 5 possessions total in the first half? 2 for each team were scoring drives, and then the kneel down, if I remember correctly.
You're correct. And the first quarter only had 2 drives total. 2 drives the entire first quarter.
Yeah, and 2 drives, long drives. And like I said, it's nice to have a long drive that scores. I should have qualified that by saying scored a touchdown, because Kansas City does score on those first 2 drives. However, they only get 3 points instead of 7. And that's a big difference in that first half, where we're looking at a 14-6. I know I'm jumping ahead there, Neil, but a 14-6 lead as opposed to a 14-14 tie or any other variable you can throw in there.
Kansas City got the ball and they moved right down the field as well. They also had a 13-play drive that took a little over 7 minutes of the first quarter. They also had like the Packers, had a good mix of running plays and passing plays. They had, as well as a Mahomes run. But the difference is when they got down to the red zone in Packers territory, our defense stepped up, and 2 huge sacks of Patrick Mahomes, one by Lucas Van Ness, one a sack by Gary and Clark, was the reason why they did not score a touchdown in the first drive. It's why they had to settle for the field goal.
First of all, Neil, you said 2 huge sacks. So, but no, I agree. And that, this was, I guess, the textbook bend but do not break defense. Once Kansas City got in the red zone, the defense said, okay, you've gone far enough. And those 2 sacks were huge.
And the Kansas City field goal was the last play of the first quarter. And just to summarize that this was a very even first quarter, other than on the points, we had 6 first downs on our 1 drive. Kansas City had 4, 75 yards to 70 Packers versus Kansas City. But the difference is, of course, we had those sacks. And I would say the other difference is that because of those 2 sacks, Jordan Love had 45 yards passing in the first quarter. Patrick Mahomes at only 18 net yards passing in that first quarter. That's in part because the running game was playing well, but it's also because we made those 2 sacks. And if you want a theme of the game, it's that we limited Patrick Mahomes compared to their ability to limit Jordan Love. Yes, their running game did very well in this game, but Patrick Mahomes' stats were below Jordan Love's stats in every single measure. That's what our defense chose to do. Our defense chose to stop Patrick Mahomes. And going back to Saturday night, one of the things that Andy Herman said that I thought was particularly interesting about the Joe Barry defense, about the Packers defense, is an analogy to the NBA. And in the NBA, of course, teams can get you by a 3-point shot. They can get you under the hoops and in the paint. The most low efficiency play in the NBA is the mid-range jumper. And Andy Herman compared the Packers defense to an NBA defense approach to the mid-range jumper. We're not going to let you beat us in the paint. We're not going to let you beat us with the long 3-point shots that are going to be the explosive plays. We'll let you have all the mid-range jumpers you want because that is the least efficient play in basketball. Running the ball is the least efficient way to move the ball in football. We allowed them a lot of yards running in this game, but that's not how they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you with their big plays. They're going to kill you with Mahomes to Kelsey, Mahomes to other receivers. We limited what Patrick Mahomes could do in the game at the cost of them getting a lot of yards rushing, but we won the game. So that approach obviously works.
As a corollary to that, we did get a bunch of big plays through the air. And that was a difference maker. So getting into the next Packer drive, so we get the ball back and go down and score another touchdown. But this was a little different. This was a little faster. And because of the bigger pass play, Kraft for 19 yards, a huge play to Wicks for 27 yards. And so now Jordan Love is kind of feeling it. There's some play action and there's a few running plays. But, now suddenly the offense is clicking.
And really, Jeff, as you talk about making that way down the field, and what's the nicest part of that is the touchdown pass to Christian Watson on the end. And Watson worked that. He worked his way into the corner and then back across midfield. He got himself open. And I think that's been a big dig on the Packers receivers, especially those older receivers over the last few years, that they had lost a step. They weren't getting themselves open. And it might have even been a dig on this team earlier this season. These young receivers, we've had the growing pains. They are now learning how to work themselves open. They're finding the soft spot in the zone. They're finding the seam. They're finding the slot. They're finding what they need to do. And Watson showed it on that play.
Well, and Love is throwing them the ball. He's trusting in them. And either, he's not quite to the throwing them open piece yet, although I think we're probably going to see that. But just, he's willing to not hold a grudge or whatever, and he's feeding his receivers whomever can get the job done. And there doesn't seem to be any favorites here, and he's spreading the ball around, and that's what's extremely effective.
But I think as much as anything, he now knows where those receivers are going to be. He knows when they're going to be open. That is the difference between now versus 6 to 8 weeks ago when you don't know where anyone's going to be and you don't know where they're going to be open. It's not just trusting, it's knowing.
There is a piece of film that I found online that's from behind the line of scrimmage. So when you're in that picture on the screen, Jordan Love is in the middle and he's throwing that ball. And in the picture, Christian Watson's not in that picture yet. And Jordan Love is literally throwing it to the middle of the end zone where there is absolutely nobody present. And Watson makes his way over and makes that catch. And that's what you're talking about, Neil. They know the spot. They are working that precision. We talked about it at the beginning of the season, right? Defense is about disruption. Offense is about precision. It takes a long time to get that precision to work. Well, it appears it took exactly 12 games for this team to really start nailing the precision.
And the execution. They're not making as many bonehead plays. They're not making, they're crisper. It just looks like a more complete, hungry team.
So Packers go ahead 14-3. Kansas City gets the ball back. And early in that drive, we saw what we had feared all game long is the Travis Kelce finding space as Travis Kelce is best able to do. And there were 4 receptions for Travis Kelce in the game. And seemingly everyone, the Packers didn't have a player within 8 to 10 yards of him. We got damaged by Travis Kelce on that drive. Mahomes running on that drive, 2 Kelce receptions, but in the end, our defense was able to once again make a sack within the red zone on a 3rd and 9 at the Green Bay 11. Preston Smith and Devontae Wyatt sacked Patrick Mahomes, 5-yard loss. Kansas City once again has to settle for a field goal after getting deep into Packers territory. It's now 14-6, and in the stands, we're feeling really, really good. The Packers drove down in the first drive. We felt great. We held Kansas City to a field goal in the second drive. We felt even better. Touchdown for the Packers on the third drive. Holy shit. This might be a magical night. And then we hold them to a field goal again on the next drive. And yeah, the crowd was absolutely rocking in the game. It was a really beautiful crowd experience.
With those 3 sacks in the red zone, that was something that Patrick Mahomes in his career had never had before. The defense just was imposing their will once they got down into the red zone.
Remember, it wasn't that long ago that we were questioning why this defense was putting 2 downed linemen inside that red zone in situations where you're expecting a run or something else to happen there. And that comes from the top. That's something where, hey, I'm pretty sure, Neil, there were no fire Joe Barry chants on Sunday night either.
So there were not, but Joe Barry has evolved his defense as well. If Joe Barry played the defense that we had 6-8 weeks ago, I don't know that we would have had the same result, but nonetheless, evolution is an important element of this team this year. We're seeing evolution on the offense, on the defense, and maybe even a little bit on the special teams so far. So Packers are ahead 14-6. We get the ball on the next drive, and we had what started out to be a pretty good drive, including a 9-yard pass to Watson, a 24-yard run by Patrick Taylor, as well as another 5-yard run. We got all the way down to the Kansas City 32-yard line. This drive started with 2:19 left in the first half. You figure, okay, we're down at the 32. Certainly we're going to get a field goal. We're going to go ahead 17-6 at halftime. This is a great situation. Unfortunately, we could not fully stand the prosperity. A Reed false start, 2 incompletions, a passing play that goes for -2. We're now at the Kansas City 39-yard line. And this is a dangerous situation with Patrick Mahomes. You try the field goal. If you make it, it's great. If you don't, Patrick Mahomes still has time to quickly go down and score. And we chose to punt at that point. And thankfully, the punting game was up to the task.
It was not a long punt, but it didn't have to be. And it did not go in the end zone, pinning Kansas City really, close to their end zone. And at that point, the half was over. They chose to kneel down. They really had no other play because the asshats, well, they came through.
This first half was fairly amazing for how few plays were going on. So I talked to my cousin Chris, who's been on the podcast before, at the 2-minute warning, and it was less than an hour into the game at the 2-minute warning. The Packers and Chiefs combined for only 2 drives in the first quarter, excluding the kneel down. They only had 3 drives in that second quarter. This was a game that was dominated time of possession wise by a lot of running plays by both teams. Also, there were not a lot of incompletions, so the clock didn't stop much. Overall, in that first half, the Packers had 12 first downs to 8 for Kansas City, 8 passing to 4 for Kansas City. Packers had 193 yards in that first half to only 136 for Kansas City. And I think the most amazing statistic of that first half for the numbers, the Packers had 121 yards passing to only 62 net passing yards for Kansas City. We controlled Patrick Mahomes in that first half. And yes, you're not going to be able to take care of him for the entire game, but 62 net yards passing for Kansas City in the first half, that's a major victory. Now, they did have 76 yards rushing, but again, this is a pick your poison situation. Our poison was we're going to allow Isaiah Pacheco to run as much as he needs to. That's going to keep Patrick Mahomes from throwing the ball. I think the other element about the first half numbers is that combined between Mahomes and Love, there were only 5 incompletions. And it wasn't because they were not throwing the ball. Love was 13 of 16. Mahomes was 9 of 11 in the first half. They were being efficient. It was just, those were 2 good quarterbacks. The theme of the game is we had 2 really good quarterbacks playing. And guess what? One of those 2 quarterbacks is our young Jordan Love.
And they're throwing the ball down the field, right? They're not like throwing it parallel to the line of scrimmage and hoping for yards after the catch. They were throwing it down the field and still being efficient.
So we move to the second half. Overall, there's slightly fewer more drives total between the 2 teams, and the scoring does continue. It's one of those games, Neil, where we've talked about needing to put together 4 full quarters. I don't know if there was 4 full quarters. It felt like maybe 3.5 to me. I think there was one point there where I felt like this team was reverting or regressing to the mean. But overall, big picture, second half, Green Bay not only stayed in the game, but they staved off Kansas City. Take it in order. How'd the crowd feel? That's what I want to know.
After the Packers did not convert on that potential field goal at the end of the first half, we knew that Kansas City had the ball to start the second half. And when Kansas City went right down the field on their first drive in the second half, I can't say that the crowd was filled with warm and fuzzies. Yes, we were supporting the team absolutely on the offense and on the defense, but Kansas City made it 75 yards in just 9 plays to start the second half, including 2 huge plays to Travis Kelce, a 21-yard conversion early, and then a 27-yard pass on a 3rd and 18 that in the end gave them obviously the first down and moved them downfield. They scored the touchdown finally with the Isaiah Pacheco touchdown. It's 14-12, and they line up for the 2-point conversion, and they score that 2-point conversion. It's a tie game, but thankfully the defense stepped up and stopped the attempted run to go in. And I think that that is one of my themes of the game, is that Andy Reid clearly had studied the Packers well. He knew that our run defense was weak. He decided to go after our run defense, but our run defense made key plays at certain points, and that 2-point conversion attempt was certainly one of those key plays.
Well, and this was the drive that had that Mahomes magic, right? That 3rd and 18. What are you going to do? You can only, hope to contain him, maybe. That was a backbreaker, though. It was just watching that. It was like he scrambles out and, you've got to sort of cover Travis Kelce. That would be good. That was Mahomes being Mahomes. And we knew this was going to happen, but it was in very, very limited quantities.
And I think the thing that we didn't know at the time is that Kelce had 2 big receptions on that drive. Those were the last 2 Travis Kelce receptions of the game.
Oh, I was going to mention that earlier. I mean, Kelce had 4 catches for 81 yards. And at that point, it felt like a lot more than 4 and a lot more than 81 yards. But you're right, for him to effectively be silent from this point forward was pretty amazing.
So the Packers get the ball back and they proceed to respond. That's what we were most concerned about is, okay, Kansas City makes their drive. Are the Packers going to be able to continue what they have been doing on offense? And indeed, they had scored 2 of their 3 drives in the first half. They'd gotten into Kansas City territory all 3 drives. They immediately go with a pass to Dillon, a bunch of running plays. On 4th and 1, however, was the biggest offensive play of the game other than the touchdowns. 4th and 1, they don't go conservative. They go long to Romeo Doubs. That was coming right toward my end zone. It was gorgeous sort of seeing that entire play develop from up above. And yes, there was a risk associated with that play, but the ball goes out of Jordan Love's hands. It's like, oh yeah, Doubs can catch that. We've got the chance here. And obviously he made the catch in between 3 defenders. Beautiful play, brilliant pass by Love, seeing exactly where his receiver is going to be. 2 plays later, a circus acrobatic catch by Christian Watson on a pass from Jordan Love. That play is captured in the photo that is shown here. And you can look at it. Love is throwing the ball. Everyone on the field is looking at Christian Watson. Watson obviously jumped up perfectly in order to catch that pass. But I mean, just look at where all the players, everyone on the sideline, it's just, we're looking and we're going to see what's going to happen here. And Watson made the play.
Well, once he caught the ball, my text to you was, that's why they drafted Watson. That was it. He's tall. He can jump. And that's exactly what he did for that catch. And I might add, he snatched the ball.
Yes, we were concerned earlier this season that he's not contesting. He's not getting those contested balls. But again, he had a spectacular game Sunday night with the 2 touchdown catches and just doing what he needed to do and showing why he was a 2nd-round draft pick.
Exactly. I just want to make a quick note how this whole drive started. A little love for the asshats, maybe. A little love. So with the Keyshawn Nixon 35-yard kickoff return.
Jeff,
Right?
Jeff, you realize the 35-yard kickoff return when it starts at the -2 only is a net +8.
But it was still a plus. Come on. I mean, a little.
At least he got past the 25.
He had 2 -2 returns in the game too. So overall on kickoff returns, we were +4. +4 on the game.
Fine.
+4 is still better than -4, Neil. Green Bay is up 21-12. A 9-point lead is comfortable. It's a 2-possession lead. But now Kansas City, Neil, they get another one of those long, sustained drives. And the question is it going to end up in a score?
Long sustained drive, and again, where they use both Mahomes and Pacheco. Pacheco had runs of 7, 8, 8, and 13 yards on that drive, in addition to Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes. But at the end of the third quarter, we still had a lead. Now, they were almost about to score a touchdown. They scored a touchdown 2 plays into that fourth quarter. And yes, there was certainly tension in the crowd. Certainly, I'm sure you all experienced tension in front of your televisions as well, as they scored the touchdown and we're still ahead 21-19. But now it is a case where a Kansas City field goal will take them ahead. Now, I gave the statistics for Love and Mahomes in the first half, only having 5 incompletions. The third quarter was actually even better for both Love and Mahomes. There were 0 incompletions. The 2 quarterbacks combined were 12 of 12 for 155 yards in the third quarter. That was a spectacular display of offense by both quarterbacks in the third quarter. And now we had a game on our hand. Now we get to see what is our team really made of, both on offense and on defense. Is this Packers team going to be able to hold that lead, or ideally build it and then make sure that Patrick Mahomes cannot win at the end?
Against the defending Super Bowl champs.
And it didn't start out well, because our first drive of the fourth quarter, we went 7 plays, but only got 16 total yards. We end up having to punt the ball right away. So yes, we used 3:16 of clock, but when you only have a 2-point lead, using 3:16 of clock is probably not your highest priority. And giving Patrick Mahomes the ball back so quickly seemed like it might be a problem, but our defense was up to it.
Well, in this drive too, though, as albeit short, there were 3 straight incompletions by Love. One when they, after the penalty where it was 1st and 16, and then he had 3 straight incompletions. So suddenly it's like, okay, the wheels haven't fallen off, but things are changing.
To be fair, that was our first drive that we didn't go into Kansas City territory. So
in the fourth quarter, yeah, okay.
Not when you want that to happen, to be sure, but our offense had played well to that point. But more importantly, Kansas City gets the ball back, and our defense forces a 3-and-out. 2-yard run by Pacheco, 2 incompletions, and they punt the ball. And I felt a lot better after we made that stop finally. Kansas City, that was their first punt of the game, was in the fourth quarter.
And that was the only 3-and-out of the game.
So we're at a lead of 21-19. And as I mentioned earlier, it had been a 2-possession game. Now you mentioned the 3-and-out. Great. Now we need something to happen, because we need to build that cushion back in. We get a good drive, but not a great drive. Results in a field goal on this one. And it pushes that lead 24-19 to 5 points, feeling a little bit more comfortable now.
Although, again, we get down to the Kansas City 18, an incomplete sack. And just as we had near the end of the first half, we got down to where we needed to go and then just backed up rather than move forward. And I would really rather see us move forward. But nonetheless, they could not beat us with a field goal now. Now Patrick Mahomes can just beat us with a touchdown, and that doesn't make me feel any better. Next drive starts, they immediately have a 9-yard pass to Rice and then a defensive pass interference on Valentine that gives them another 15 yards. They've got 1st and 10 at the Green Bay 49. It's like, oh shit, this is Patrick Mahomes magic. And then it was not Patrick Mahomes magic.
It was Keyshawn Nixon magic. That's what it was, Neil. He was everywhere. Returning kicks, returning punts, and intercepting Patrick Mahomes.
He noted in the post-game presser that he had watched enough tape that he picked up on a signal, a hand signal or a tap that Mahomes gave in that formation, that he went ahead with it, and he said, I knew where that ball was going to go, and he got to that spot.
Just brilliant anticipation. That is what we needed in the game, and that was certainly the biggest defensive play in the game, because they go down and score a touchdown. We're behind. I'm not entirely convinced we're going to win that game. Nixon makes the big play, and now we've at least got the chance to try to do something, and we took advantage. The next drive, the Packers had the ball now with 5:14 left in the game, ahead 5 points. We had a very solid sustained drive. We went 35 yards in 11 plays, and I think the 11 plays was the key. We used 4:05 on the clock, although we got down to the Kansas City 20 and then again took a sack that moved us backwards. we had a critical kick, a critical field goal, arguably the most important field goal of Anders Carlson's young career, 48 yards in the cold at Lambeau in December. He hits it to give us an 8-point lead. And now Kansas City only has 1:09 in order to catch up 8 points down.
1:09, Neil, or 69 seconds?
69, of course, very nice. And it ended up being nice for the Packers, thankfully.
That field goal was not a gimme. I was on the edge of my seat for that thing. Right. I mean, it was a had-to-have field goal, and he came through to make it that 8-point lead, which was huge.
And an 8-point lead is comfortable. It's more comfortable than a 7-point lead, because if you give up the touchdown, getting that 2-point conversion is a little bit tougher. But with that 1:09, 69 seconds on the clock, and the way this defense has been playing, it really felt a lot more comfortable. There's a lot to talk about on that final drive, and it has been rehashed, and we don't need to rehash it. We're not worried about where the penalties were or weren't called. The game happened the way the game happened. Green Bay walks away with a win in this matchup.
One of my big takeaways is that the Packers were efficient in this game. So they had 7 total drives, and of those 7 total drives, 5 were scores, which, you talked about putting together 4 quarters, we'll get 3.5 or whatever, but still, this was against Kansas City, the defending Super Bowl champions, Mahomes Magic. They were efficient. 7 total drives, 5 scores on those drives, and they were spectacular scores. They were clutch field goals and spectacular touchdowns.
Yeah, and the fourth quarter felt like hanging on for dear life. When you actually look at the statistics, we actually were the better team in that fourth quarter. We outgained them 122 yards to 49 in that fourth quarter. Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter was 5 of 15 for only 49 yards, 1 touchdown, but 1 interception. Patrick Mahomes had a bad fourth quarter in that game. And it's not just that he played poorly. I never thought there was a situation where Patrick Mahomes was playing poorly. It's that our defense stepped up in that fourth quarter. They stepped up in that final drive. And yes, there was this balance of, there should have not been this penalty or that penalty. But I think in the end, those final drive penalties all essentially canceled each other out. And the result was the result. And I think we need to emphasize, even if the Chiefs had scored on that final drive, they still needed to make a 2-point conversion, and that still would have only been a tie in the game. No matter what you think about all of the calls, and again, I thought they were balanced, we still had an 8-point lead, and they needed to score 8 points, and Patrick Mahomes' final 4 throws were all incompletions.
So not only is the most important statistic there, Neil, in our favor, but now we've got a 5-game stretch where Jordan Love has been playing spectacular football. Over the last 5 games, a near 2/3 completion percentage at 66.1. In those 5 games, 1,374 yards. That's 275 yards, call it, per game, with that 300-yard game that he threw in there. In these 5 games, 11 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. And when we look at these last 5 games, we have to say, can this carry over for the next 5 games? And if he can perform the same way in the next 5 games or this final 5-game stretch, we've got a spectacular finish to this season on our hands. Let me throw a projection at you. Right now, Jordan Love is on pace to throw for 4,060 yards this season, 31 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. And that's not including the 327 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns he's projected to have. But here's the fun stat, Neil. 4,060 yards for Jordan Love in his first season as a starter would surpass the Chicago Bears franchise all-time single-season passing record of just 3,838 yards held by Eric Kramer in 1995.
That says a lot about Jordan Love, but it also says a lot about the Chicago Bears. But I mean, what can you say? Jordan Love really has stepped it up. And I think the thing that impressed me most in the last game, as well as in the last few games, is how Jordan Love has responded to pressure. How many throws in that game did Jordan Love have Kansas City defenders, Kansas City rushers right in his face, and he throws it off? And I think that Dobbs reception, that Dobbs completion on the 4th and 1, that is the most impressive throw of the game, because you've got to be able to stand tough in the face of an oncoming rush. That's exactly what that was. Looking overall at Jordan Love versus Patrick Mahomes in this game, Jordan Love, 267 yards, 7.4 yards per attempt, obviously the 3 touchdowns. His QBR was 90.3, standard quarterback rating 118.6. Kansas City only had 4 quarterback hits, and that's partly because our offensive line is good in pass blocking, but it's also because Jordan Love feels pressure. And that was arguably Brett Favre's greatest strength, is he could feel pressure and know when to get rid of it in order to make the play. Jordan Love seems to be making the plays in the context of pressure. I love what I'm seeing from him.
He definitely played in the zone on Sunday night. Over the last 5 games, a 4-1 record. Hey, I'll take a 4-1 record over the next 5 games as well. Now, this 5-game stretch coming up starts out with a trip to New York City Monday night. Here's the big question. Will Jordan Love finish the 2023 season with more touchdown passes in MetLife Stadium than Aaron Rodgers?
That's a really low bar, John. I'm not impressed by that opportunity, but it is funny though, because I certainly had planned on going to the game in New York. I'm going to be going to the game in New York. New York is close enough to where I live, but I also had planned to go to at least one Jets game in MetLife. Obviously that disappeared as far as my motivation to go once Aaron Rodgers got injured, but I'm really looking forward to seeing a happy game in MetLife Stadium for Jordan Love.
Plus, Green Bay is going into New York to face a Giants team that has won 4 games this season. Now, granted, they won their last 2, and they're coming off of a bye. They've been outscored 89-17 just by the Dallas Cowboys alone. But how, Jeff, have they even won 4 games this season?
I have no fucking idea, John. I got nothing. Neil?
I think the key is that they've had a very easy schedule, or a schedule that's worked out to be very easy. Their 4 wins are by 3 points over Arizona. They've beaten the Commanders twice, and we know what the disaster the Commanders are, and they beat the Pats by 3 points. I think the most representative game of the Giants season is losing 13-10 to the Jets in overtime in the New York Bowl. And overall, the statistics on the Giants are bleak at best. If we look overall at yards per game, the Giants are 32nd in the NFL at 259 yards per game. They're 32nd in the NFL at 152 passing yards per game. They're really good at the run. They're 18th in running yards per game, 31st in points per game on offense. Their offense is bad. Their running game is the only way they're going to accomplish anything. And their defense is only slightly better. In yards per game, their defense is 28th, 20th against the pass, 28th against the run, 26th in points. Their only positive number, as far as looking at their overall team statistics, is that they are tied for 6th in turnover differential at +5, mainly because they are good at creating takeaways. They've created 19th or 8th in the NFL. But overall, this is a team that is not very good. Our numbers are still fairly middling because they're averaged over the season. I, again, think that we are better than what our averages are over the season. But going by DVOA, that overall metric, the Giants are 32nd, and they're a very distant 32nd by DVOA overall. 31st DVOA offense, 26th DVOA defense, 25th DVOA special teams. They've had bad wins, and you can, if you're a Giants fan and you want to be positive, you say, wow, Tommy DeVito has done well. Tommy DeVito, I will admit, is a better quarterback than Danny DeVito, but he is last among all quarterbacks in the NFL in expected points added per play. In 136 dropbacks, he has been sacked 26 times.
Ooh.
This should be a feast for our edge rushers and defensive linemen in this game. Put pressure on him early and often. I think we should have a very good game on defense.
And this is a rematch of the game from London last year, but these are 2 teams, Jeff, the storied franchises of the Packers and the Giants. There's a lot of history between those 2 teams. You have a specific story of one of them.
I do. Packers and Giants NFL Championship, December 31st, 1961. First and foremost, this was the first time a championship game was ever played in Green Bay. The Packers had clinched a Western Conference championship on December 3rd against those Giants in Milwaukee on their way to an 11-3 regular season record. The Giants were the Eastern Conference champions at 10-3-1 and were forced to journey back to the Badger State 4 weeks later to face Lombardi and a Packer team eager to avenge their loss to Philadelphia in the 1960 championship game just a year earlier. So the Packers opened up as a 3.5 point favorites, but the frigid Green Bay weather played a big part in giving the home team a decisive edge on that cold 20-degree day. Both teams started slowly in the scoreless first quarter. Packers wore cleats on the frozen turf, dominated the sneaker-wearing Giants, both offensively and defensively.
Wait, sneakers? Do we have photos of this?
No, that's
a wardrobe malfunction is part of what hurt the Giants. That's interesting.
Yeah, by the time they switched over to cleats, it was too late. The Giants suffered 5 turnovers and only managed 130 total yards to 345 for Green Bay. The final was 37-0 Green Bay, total domination by Lombardi and the Packers. Now, as it was New Year's Eve, Green Bay fans stormed the field, tore down the goalposts, paraded them around the city, which made headlines in the local Green Bay Press-Gazette. Now, even for all the revelry that afternoon and evening, it was probably Paul Hornung who had the best New Year's Eve. He scored 19 total points in the game.
Paul Hornung, first of all, always scored. Let's start out with that.
He had 19 total points in the game, and he took home not only a $5,195 paycheck as a member of the winning team, but also a brand new 1962 Corvette after being named the championship game's MVP. Now, although the upcoming game between the Packers and the Giants won't be for the NFL championship, a Packers victory on Monday night will go far towards achieving their playoff aspirations of 2023.
And a 5-game stretch that, is going to make a big difference in this season where they are 6-6 now. We'll probably talk more about that next week. Some other notes here. The Green Bay Packers former kicker Mason Crosby has signed with the Los Angeles Rams, hopefully kicking indoors if they need him through the remainder of the season. Will help him out. Best of luck to Mason. Jeff, another big stat, though, is Jordan Love has had 4 games so far this season with 3 or more touchdowns and no interceptions. But the big number on that is having at least 5 games doing that.
There are 2 other Packer quarterbacks that have had success with 5 games with 3 or more touchdown passes and 0 interceptions. Favre had 5 such games in 1995 when he won the MVP. Rodgers did it 5 times. 4 of the times he did it, he was MVP. And the other time, he had actually 6 games in which he had 3 or more touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. That was in 2016 when they ran the table.
All right. Hopefully, Jordan Love can do that again in one of these last 5 games. Jeff, was that your final thought? I meant to ask you. Final thoughts?
Was, John.
All right, Neil, final thoughts.
I like the trends as far as this team is concerned. One trend, the Packers defense is stepping up. The Packers offense is stepping up. The Packers were the first team to drop 27 points on the Kansas City defense this year. The month of December has been very good for Matt LaFleur's teams. The Packers have now won 16 straight games under Matt LaFleur in December. He's 16-0 in December games. The Packers' longest streak of consecutive wins in any given month were in October of 1928 to 1932, where they won 20 straight games in October. And in 1960 to 1963, the Packers won 17 straight games in October. The longest streak for consecutive wins in December for a team was the Clippers, who won 18 straight December games from 06 to 09. So the Packers have a chance to set that record. We're sort of combining the Packers doing better as a team and Matt LaFleur's overall record in December. But the most important direction that I see is what Jordan Love is doing overall. Jordan Love has 22 touchdowns on the year. He's actually 5th in the NFL in total touchdown passes on the year, behind Dak Prescott as the leader with 26, and behind Josh Allen, Tua, and Brock Purdy as the others that are ahead of him. He's 5th in the NFL in touchdowns on the year. I mean, this is a quarterback who is showing his not just growth, but showing his evolution toward being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. If we see that evolution just even stay steady or continue over the next 5 weeks, we're going to have not only a playoff team, but we have the potential for a playoff run. I'm really looking forward to being in MetLife Stadium on Monday night and seeing the Packers continue this evolution. It's going to be a fun weekend. Go Pack, go.
Neil, have fun at the game. For those of you watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave us a comment. You can also find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Spotify. Facebook, it's the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.